Hey everybody, welcome to this edition of The Sum Up. I got to start by saying congratulations, you have made it to the end of the first 9 weeks. First year teachers, you've survived your first quarter of teaching, which is not an easy thing to do. Veteran teachers, it's another quarter in the books. You guys have had a great start to the year. I'm very proud and happy with all the things that you guys have been doing and all the successes we have had, and you guys should be too, so celebrate those things and be proud of yourselves, okay? So today we're going to talk about some food for thought as we move into the second quarter with some planning, some reflecting, and some coaching. And again, it's food for thought because I like food a lot, so it makes sense to have some food for thought. Okay, so let's have a great time. Here we go. So our first section in our food for thought is going to be on planning and reflecting, and basically all I wanted to do is to provide you with some questions that you can be asking yourself as you're planning. Then again, on the back side of your lesson, some questions you can ask yourselves as a reflection piece. So I'm going to put them up on the screen. I also, in the description of this video, have put a Google Doc that has all the questions on there, so you could just print this off and have it sitting there while you're doing your lessons. The way that it is in the Google Doc, you actually have room to write into it. It's in a table, so if you really wanted to go the extra mile and physically write in the answer to these questions as you're planning, go for it. That might be beneficial to you. If you're somebody that just could use them sitting there asking these questions to yourself while you're planning, then just print it off and have the questions sitting there to ask yourself. Okay, so basically our questions are: what standard am I covering in this lesson? What is my goal or desired outcome for this lesson? So what are the students supposed to be getting out of this? What misconceptions can I predict my kids will have during this lesson, and how am I going to address them? So what can you already foresee being a sticking point for your students? In what ways will my students be interacting or collaborating with each other during this lesson? We've talked a lot about this year, getting our kids to interact with each other. This is something that works better when it's strategically planned. So what places in your lesson make good spots for collaboration and interaction? Then on the back side of your lesson, some reflecting questions you can ask yourself after the lesson's gone would be: did my students achieve the desired goal? So did they reach that goal or outcome that I wanted? On a scale of 1 to 10, how hard were my students asked to work or think during this lesson? And then how can I up that level of rigor, up that number for my students so they're working harder? Because again, we talked about a lot, we want to take the load off of you guys as a teacher and put that workload on them as the students. They need to be working harder than what you're working. So how can we get them to work harder? How can we tweak our lessons a little bit? And then finally, our last reflecting question is: how am I going to make sure that what I taught my students today is carried over into tomorrow or future lessons? So we don't want it to be choppy where we teach something one day and just totally forget about it the next day, teach something the next day and forget about that. We want it to be fluid. How are we spiraling back? Is it through bell work? Is it through a summary? How are we doing that? Asking yourself those questions. So again, I have a page that you can print off. It looks like this. So feel free to do that, or even just to have it pulled up and ask yourself these questions as you're going through your planning. All right, so our second food for thought piece is going to be on coaching. And when we're talking about coaching, we're really meaning like peer-to-peer coaching or teaching. So student to student, teaching each other, coaching each other, walking each other through how to do a problem. So I was at this training on Monday, and they gave us this table to look at. And the table basically goes through the different ways that teachers teach students and the retention or the transfer that occurs during each method. So the one we specifically want to look at is down at the very bottom with peer coaching. So I've highlighted it for you, and specifically that transfer of knowledge. So as you can see, peer coaching has 95% transfer rate. So when they're teaching each other or they're coaching each other through a problem, that's when the most transfer or the most understanding or the deepest level of thinking is really occurring. We want those experiences to happen. So we need to be thinking about strategically, how are we getting our kids the opportunities to teach each other and to coach each other. So one document I've provided you is something that I used in class. It looked like this. So you can see on the left side it has problem to work, on the right side it has steps with vocabulary. The last time I did this with my kids was down towards the end of the year over our unit with systems of equations, so I just pulled up the document that I had already made. And there's two roles, so you have your kids in partners. One student would be the coaching role, one student would be the student role. If you are the coaching role, you are teaching the student how to do this problem, so you are responsible for walking them through the problem. If you're the student role, I would tell my kids, you don't write anything down unless the coach specifically tells you to write it down. So the coach has to say, okay, in our first step, we're going to do this. Let's write this down. And the student would write it down. Student doesn't write it down unless the coach specifically tells them. So in this first example, the coach would help the student work through that problem, telling them what to do each step. Then they'd move over to the step side with vocabulary, and they would fill that in. Again, the coach is saying, here's the first step we did. What vocab did we use? They figure it out together, and they write it down. Then the coach again is saying, okay, second step, here's what we did. What vocab did we use or what took place? And they write that down together. Then when they're done with the first problem, they switch roles and move into the second problem. So if you were the coach for the first problem, you're now the student. If you're the student for the first problem, you're now the coach, and you work through the same process. So again, the student's not writing anything down unless the coach tells them to, and then they're going through the steps again together. So it gives them an opportunity to be the teacher and to be the coach and really have to verbally explain things to each other. Which we've talked a lot about, collaborating and using vocabulary and things like that. This is just another way to do it. So this can be done on this page like I had it, or it's also as simple as just doing it straight in the book. If you find some problems that work well and there's room in the book, having them teach each other through that. But again, since teaching and peer coaching has the highest transfer, we want to be thinking about ways we can start implementing that into our teaching. Alright guys, so that concludes our food for thought over planning, reflecting, and coaching. Remember, use those questions, help you. You can print them out and then strategically be thinking about how we can have our kids peer-to-peer teaching and coaching each other as we move into the next quarter. You guys are so awesome. Keep up all your great work. It's going to be a great second quarter, guys.